people, we're with Corrections Unfiltered, podcast where corrections meets conversation. Have another great show tonight, but before we do that, let's make sure we hit that subscribe button. Just so you know, we've actually hit over 250 subscribers, and that's a great thing for us. That lets us know that we're on the right track, we're doing the right things, we're having the conversations that you want us to have. Don't forget, you can also reach out to us at correctionsunfiltered@gmail.com and tell us some ideas about the things that you want us to talk about. Also, go on with that subscribe button. Hit the like button if you like this particular conversation. I hope you will. So let's get the Corrections Unfiltered team. We have a very special guest host tonight, Mr. Josh Ryle. Josh, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you?
Good. Hey, it was great to have you on the podcast not too long ago, and it's great to have you here as a guest host. Rick Harnes, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Good. Chris McConnell, how are you?
Same. Doing good. Glad to be here.
And glad you're here too. And tonight, what we want to introduce to you is Gary York. Gary is a person I saw bouncing around on LinkedIn, just seeing different posts that he was putting out. And he authors some books, and we're going to talk about one of those books tonight. But then as I got to know more and more about Gary, I realized not only is he a veteran of corrections, prisons, and jails, but he's also one of our veterans of our United States Army. So we want to say thank you to Mr. York for his service in the Army. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all of you, and thank you, and I'm glad to be here with you.
Well, sir, you have a very long bio because you got a lot of history behind you. Do you mind go ahead and just kind of giving us some of the highlights of what you've been up to these last several years?
Yes, sir. Right out of high school, I went in the Army, and I did 10 years in the United States Army Military Police. When I got out of the Army, like most folks that get out of the Army, I needed a job right away, so I walked into a prison, applied to be a correctional officer, and told myself this is going to be just a holdover for me. Well, 28.8 years later, I retired from corrections, working in the prison, state prison system and the county jail system. And I don't regret a moment of it. And I'm glad I stuck it out to get to the end of the rainbow, as I call it. Right now, I'm retired, but I work for corrections1.com. I'm a columnist. I write corrections articles. I have a YouTube called True Prison Stories, and I've written some books about corrections. I just can't get away from it. And right now, I'm trying to help educate and inform and do anything I can to help young officers get started in this business and give advice to anybody that needs it. I always tell people, we don't know everything. 28.8 years in corrections, I don't know everything. I just did a presentation at the ILETA conference in Missouri earlier this year in front of a bunch of professionals. And after I gave my presentation, I sat in on their classes, took notes. We learn every day. I just wanted to throw that out there. Don't stop learning. We don't know it all.
You know, you're absolutely right. That's one of the things that I really was captivated by with your book, The Toughest Job. And got it. I want to see what it was all about. And you dissect so many different positions and duties that take place in a correctional environment or a jail environment. And what you do is, in my opinion, is you give a great breakdown on the intricate parts of the duties that are there, what their responsibilities are for, and the whys. And I think that really answers a lot of questions, especially to people who are just joining into corrections, is the whys. So how did this particular book come about?
Well, I tried to think of everything that a correctional officer goes through. Now, I'll guarantee you I didn't think of everything. We could probably write another one, but I tried to think of I know how tough a job corrections is, but I wanted people to know that aren't just in corrections, but on the outside to know how tough correctional work is and what correctional officers have to face on a daily basis. So when I wrote this book, I wanted to use real life scenarios. I did not want to make up a scenario. So I used real life scenarios in the book, and I even have a chapter straight from the heart where I ask a lot of correctional officers, what did you think about your career? And I have a few other professionals that put a blurb in my book as well, their experience. I just think that people need to know how tough the correction work is. And I also wanted to emphasize in my book that real life scenario training has always been important to me. And I think it needs to be done everywhere. It's just my opinion.
Hey, Gary. Welcome to Corrections Unfiltered. It's an honor to have you on the show. And first and foremost, I'll repeat what Pete said. Thank you for your military and your public service.
Thank you
U.S.
very
Army, U.S. Army, hooah.
Thank
I bet almost every person who retires after, say, 20, 30 years in corrections considers writing a book. It has crossed my mind probably hundreds of times. However, you didn't think about it. You did it. You are an author. How long did it take you to make that decision? How long did it take you to write your first book?
Well, the first book was Corruption Behind Bars from my 12 years on the investigative side of corrections. That took me about 2 years. Um, and of course, I had to get a civil attorney because I'm talking about investigations that I did that are completed and gone. But I had to let a civil attorney review it because I didn't want anything to come back on me. That took about 2 years. And then this book took a little over a year because I was trying to figure out how to make it. I felt the toughest job was going to be a learning tool. I was hoping an educational tool. So I really wanted it to stand out, and I wanted to hit all the high points of corrections and the dangers that we face in it.
You know, some of the things that I took from the book, Gary, was the fact that many times when we're dealing with a staff member who maybe is newer or they're in over their head, and the inmates obviously have more experience of being in prison, they begin the manipulation part. And it can take many different faces of manipulation. Is you talk over in different parts, different chapters. You talk about writing reports, report the manipulation, report the comment, because what staff fail to understand, in my opinion, a lot of times is that when you make those reports out, there's somebody who's putting pieces of a puzzle together. And those people are going to say, I need to go talk to inmate Y because I can detect that he's going around to our newer staff and trying to do manipulation. I really appreciate the fact that you've included that, because too many times staff members say, I'm going to give the inmate a break, or they feel that they're savvy enough to deal and manage this inmate, and they're really not. And they're apprehensive about approaching leadership. They need to be positive about approaching leadership. What do I do now to be able to make it in that environment? What do you feel about that?
It is so important for officers to understand that we have the report writing system and we have our supervisors that we can go to. You do not have to be ashamed to say, hey, I think this inmate is trying to manipulate me. Here's the situation. What do you think? And if you're a good leader, you're going to say, let's document that. I did an article for Corrections One. If there's no documentation, it didn't happen. The old saying, you know. So, and if you document it, and then the inmate knows, uh-oh, I approached this officer and I tried to manipulate him and get a little break or get something brought in, and they immediately reported me. That puts a stop to the whole thing. And I always believe no one signed on the dotted line and took the oath to become a correctional officer with the intent of coming in and bringing something to an inmate or doing a favor for an inmate. But inmates are masters at manipulation. And especially with the younger officers, they will look for every weakness they can find and manipulate that officer and get them in what I call the trap. And once the officer's in that trap, now they're scared now they're really scared to document and report, right? Because they feel like, oh, I think I've done something wrong. I think I stepped over the line. I don't want to report it. But I also tell officers, if you think you stepped over the line, you still go for help. Go for help. You probably can still be saved. But if you keep your mouth shut and this thing festers, you could lose your job or even worse, go to jail. So that's why I wanted to get that in there. Officers need to know, and their supervisors need to let their officers know, you can come to us for help. And I think if we're working together that way, that's what we need to do, teamwork. Don't
Yes, sir.
let the inmates know we stand together stronger and we're not separate.
I agree 100% with that message. I know in my experience too, where we kind of get off track when it comes to identifying these situations. We get this old saying in our busy world of routine, and it's called "Don't sweat the small stuff." And we say, oh, well, an inmate so-and-so, they approached me with this, or they approached me with that. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And then they say, that's going to pull me away from this. We got to get this done. And I try to express to folks throughout and throughout. It's like, listen, documentation is our spear. When there's any type of approach of any type of solicitation, that's not a, hey, I'll let you get by with this one time. That's worth the documentation, hands down. And that's always been something that I've always tried to push against. When you don't sweat the small stuff will snowball into something very large, and usually by the time we learn it, it's too late. We're in the trap, like you just said a while ago. And so yeah, like Pete was saying too, encouraging them to document all of those incidents. There is nothing that is minuscule enough to not put down on paper when it's coming to stepping or walking that line of policy of what's allowed in, what's allowed, or what's not allowed, kind of thing. Was that something that you experienced in your career as well, as far as officers adopting that mentality over time? We dismiss serious situations based on the routine because sometimes our priorities get mixed up, even though we're going to do those same wrecks and showers the very next day and the next day and the next day. Is that something that you ran into?
Absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because there's been times when inmates say, we had an incident in jail. Inmates say, when I get out of jail, I know where you live and I'm going to come kick your ass. And you say, he's just talking. He's just full of baloney. And you don't do anything about it. Well, in this particular case, the inmate did threaten him. He's a friend of mine. He wrote an incident report. And you're not going to believe where it was, but he's getting gas in Lake Wales. And this inmate is getting gas at the other pump. And the inmate actually kept his promise. He walked over to him and said, remember me? Remember what I told you I was going to do? This officer was one who always worked out. I'm surprised that the inmate even challenged him. He attacked the officer at the gas station. Well, the Lake Wales police came. They wanted to charge both of them, and he explained that I'm an officer. He threatened me in the jail. They called South County Jail. They found that officer's incident report. They didn't arrest the officer.
Wow.
Look how that saved him, by writing that report. But you could play it off like that guy's
Absolutely.
just talking.
Gary, we always talk a lot about training, the kind of the way we came up, kind of training we were getting, and the kind of what appears to be the lack of importance placed on training, at least in where we came from. And I remember when I first came in, they had this class in officer training, and Glencoe was, I think it was games inmates play, and it was we got we got a little kind of a corny book, and it was I say corny because the stories were pretty rudimentary, but they always stuck with me in that uh, there's no small amount of manipulation that can go on. It needs to be reported. You can minimize it in your head, but if you don't report it and pass it on up, then it doesn't go up the chain. I realized very quickly, and this is kind of the nexus here for me, was that working confidential informants or trying to work at the same level of the sophistication of inmates was not in my wheelhouse. And I found that as I went through my career, there were people that thought they could stand toe to toe with inmates when it came into manipulation, and would get themselves hemmed up. Uh, so I would always told people, no matter what you think you can do, make sure you document that, pass it up the line, and let somebody like Pete or Gary or Chris take care of that, because I can't do that. That's not my thing. But I found a lot of people couldn't admit that to themselves and thought they could do it. And the inmates would make them believe that they were smarter than they were. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. And Games Inmates Play and The Art of the Con by Gary Cornelius, both those books, actually, I tell people read them now. Actually, Art of the Con Edition 3 is coming out, and I have a chapter in that one, but the original author got a hold of me to do a chapter. Art of the Con and games inmates play, I think help you. It would help officers to read that. But yes, sir, I totally agree, because the inmates will play you against your own staff, and they'll say, Officer so and so was talking bad about you the other day, and I don't even know why you mess with those guys. We're your buddy. Uh, Maybe not exact words, but you get my drift. We're your friend.
Mm.
Your co-workers are not your friends. We'll protect you if anything goes down. Look at those guys; they won't respond fast enough to help you. You hit the nail right on the head. They will play to make you think as an officer, wow, this inmate's pretty smart. But all he's doing is trying to get you on his side to get something further from.
There in chapter 6, which you had is surviving your rookie year. One of the things that really captivated me is your line in here. You have, show the officers who have been around some respect. Never undermine your trainer or be the one that knows it all. And that is something that I saw so much, especially in my later time, in prisons, because we had such a young staff. The majority of our staff had less than 3 years of service. Was they would think that the people who had more seniority were not as active or not as fired up as that they were. So therefore they weren't affected. They weren't good anymore. And the reality was, I was telling them, they just know how to play the game for the marathon that it is and not the sprint. So I really appreciate that. What are some of the other tips that you give in that's surviving your rookie year that you think is fundamental to somebody coming new into corrections to understand about the long game of corrections?
I wanted to do a chapter to let the rookies know, okay, you've been through the academy, and that's good. You need a foundation before you come in. But now the going gets tough. You're going to be on the floor. We want to put a good officer with you to train you, but you have to listen. You have to be open-minded. And the worst thing you'll do is come in as a know-it-all. And I explained that if your trainer's been in for 10 or 15 years and you come in and try to tell him, I don't agree with that, and I think it should be this way, you're not going to get very far. You're already starting on the wrong foot. And you need to listen, look, and learn. But it's okay, though, to ask questions. And I put in there, and even as a trainer, you need to know it's okay for them to ask you a question. Can we do that again? Can you show me that again? You're going to get a lot of whys now, because it's very important to know, what do we have? Maybe 4 generations in corrections, getting ready to be 3. Who knows? But 3 or 4 generations in corrections now, and everyone has a different upbringing, and there's a lot of whys, and why do we do it this way? We have to answer those questions, but we just don't want to have a know-it-all and someone coming in with a big ego. You're not going to learn that way if you think you know it all. And that's why I wrote that
Absolutely.
chapter. I think they need to know they're not officers yet. You have to get some time under your belt to really become a correctional.
Great point.
Hey Gary, with all your experience and your book research and your continued engagement in corrections, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the top challenges are facing jails and prisons out there. And I realize that's a loaded question. For example, you may have external issues like drone introductions or synthetic drugs through the mail, and internal issues like low staffing and high numbers of violent incidents. But I'm really interested to see what you're seeing. What are you seeing? What are the top challenges out there?
Well, obviously, some of the challenges are low staffing, overworked, mandatory overtime. And the more you are overworked, the more tired you get. The more mandatory overtime, the more tired you get. You become less attentive. And officer safety is such a huge thing. We have to watch out for each other. I always tell everybody, look, we only have ourselves. We're going to have obstacles. We're going to be short staffed. We're going to have to be there for 16 hours, sometimes working 4 extra hours past our 12-hour shift. But we have to respond. If there's a call for assistance, officer needs assistance. And I'm going to have to get a little tough on this one. Don't let me find out that you sat back and said, sounds like they got enough response. I don't think I need to run on this one. You better be running, and you better be running fast to assist your fellow officers. Because how are we going to survive? We're going to survive by helping each other and teamwork. And I think any officer that doesn't get off their rear end and respond to help an officer in need, we need to have some type of talk and some type of retraining and
Absolutely.
issue. We have to train our officers um, on the inmate manipulation is a big one. We need to train our officers on ethics, and we need to show them what happens when you cross the line, and let them know that it can be very serious and detrimental to their whole life if they don't make the right ethical decisions. We need to train. In training, we actually need to do some real life scenario training so that officers can get the feel for emergency situations, like cell extraction. Polk County Sheriff Jared made us play the inmate, and two guys come in and get him, and then we switched. And now I'm the officer going in to get the inmate. A lot of agencies are a little bit afraid, like, oh, I don't want injuries because we're short-staffed already. I fully understand that. But if we don't do these things, we're not going to get the feel for the real situation. Safety for officers, contraband control. We can't do our searches. We don't have enough people. We've got to find a way to do those searches because contraband kills. Knives, drugs coming in the mail, these powders coming in. They kill, and it puts everyone at risk, not just the officers, but the civilian staff and the inmates as well. Short-staffed or not, we've got to find a way to get these things done. And also, I believe for officer safety, I've talked to a few people. We have to get back to the basics. We have to use the disciplinary tools that are available to us, or the inmates are going to run wild and they're going to run over it. If we don't write them up when we need to write them up, if we don't give them disciplinary reports and take away something from them, if we don't remove the ones who are fighting and hurting, attacking officers, attacking other inmates, and we don't take them and lock them up, we're not doing our job. Because on the street, a law enforcement officer arrests someone who assaulted somebody on a bus, hurt them badly. Why do we remove that person from the street and lock them up so they don't hurt another person at the moment? And then we'll go through the investigative and criminal system. We're no different. We're a small city in prison. If we have an inmate harming other inmates or harming staff, they have to be removed and locked up. An investigation administratively, maybe criminally, will go on. And once we find out what the issue is with the inmate, we're not going to hurt the inmate. We will do what we have to do if it's a mental health issue, take them to get mental health treatment. If it's an issue with something that they found out their mom and dad died and they went off, or their mom or dad died and they went off for some reason that one day, we have to investigate and find out. We are not there to harm the inmates. We save more inmate lives every year than what the few bad apples you hear about on the media. And the media doesn't help us. If the media would write up every good thing we do, it would outweigh all the unfortunate things by a mile.
Good point. Gary, so to kind of piggyback off of what Chris had asked earlier, going to some of the problems that we deal with in corrections, and I heard you mention, the short staff, the long hours, all the workload never goes away. If in some cases actually increases, even though our staff decreases. Now, was it ever your experience? I know in my experience, there were times that certain culture, toxic work culture, the negativity that kind of comes over corrections historically, where we actually end up working against ourselves and contributing to these problems. Are these things that you experienced as well? And if so, how did you combat that?
I'll tell you, you have to do a culture study if you're, I think, if you're management, you have to do a culture study. I spent 3 days working on a team that went in to try to help. We separated the front line, the middle management, and the upper management. And we said, there's 3 of us here. We are going to take notes, but we don't want your names. We're going to ask you some questions. We're not going to do a report on what you said. My God, they opened up their mouth. They said, I'm only here for the money. Why are you only here for the money? And they actually said they're working not just 16 hours, but they're getting held over 20 and 24-hour shifts. They're so short staffed. And they said the culture here is bad. And when we went to middle management, they said the same. When we went to upper management, they said the same. So the panel, me and the panel were like, I don't believe I've ever been on a panel like this where front line, middle management, and upper management all agree this is happening. So we said, look, everybody's in agreement that the culture is bad. It's a toxic culture. Officers are getting attacked like crazy over there too. Officer safety is part of the issue. So when we put together a plan for them, they either use it or they don't use it. It's totally up to them. But we turned in our final package to them, and God bless them. Those officers are having it rough over there. But I did find professional staff. I did find officers look good in their uniform, even with all those hours. Somebody will say, oh, that was just a show because you were there. But I don't think so. We were a very small panel that wasn't like a big hoopla before we got there. They just want a better work environment, a better culture, and they would like to have some days off, they said, just to get some rest. These are factors that are really hurting us at corrections.
Gary, kind of talking along with what you just said, you see it a lot in just you hear about it in just about every system. I know Chris and Pete and I saw it in the bureau. Is the whether it's a jail, county jail, state lockup, or a federal prison, the the seems to be the emphasis on that system is very low. The priority is very low, and in turn, the budgets are very low. And so you find these systems are swimming upstream. They don't have enough staff. They can't pay overtime, but the mission continues. You know, it's a 24/7, 365 uh, job, and public safety is important, and you got to keep these guys behind bars, and you got to keep them safe. And on top of that, you got to give them 3 hots and a cot. You got to give them their recreation. You got to give them their fresh air. You got to give them their medical, their psych, their programs. How to the end of what you were saying, how do you see the public perception of corrections changing, and the mission of staff, so that the money and the priority toward that and the money starts coming in as would be appropriate? Because you see, for me, I see it across the board, very low priority. It's one of those things that, and even the public, hey, lock them up, throw away the key. I don't want to see them. I don't want to hear about them. Or the other side, let everybody out and let them run buck wild. How can you change that so that the money comes in that they need to run these places right?
Well, obviously, we need to get more representatives to speak for us. We need to get more of us in front of legislators. And I know every year we have people from corrections in Tallahassee saying we need more money for this, we need more money for that. Sometimes you get some more money and sometimes you don't. And then they tell you, sorry, corrections, we just don't have enough this year. So you'll have to go another year. We have to try to retain officers. So we're going to have to start to try to hire to retain instead of hire for a body. Sure, we need a live body in a uniform, but how long is that person going to stay with it? We need to find ways to recruit and hire to retain, and then we need to teach our supervisors how to lead to retain. So we don't get this culture we just talked about. I wish I could give a solid answer to the short staffing, but you're absolutely right. If we don't get heard by the legislature, we don't get heard by the people who give us more money, and they don't take us seriously, we're going to keep tumbling down this staff shortage tunnel.
Trust me. Well, I think we're all on the same sheet of music here. It's frustrating for me, and I'm sure for you, to see that, here's your budget. We're gonna cut it. But you didn't have enough last year, but you're gonna have to run. The message was do more with less, and then it was do everything with nothing.
You talk about money. The warden, I won't say where, said, "Hey, we need more razor wire. We have located some spots our officers have reported weak areas. Don't have enough money right now to get you that razor wire. We will when we can." And no lie, folks, six inmates escaped. Oh, now the razor wire's coming down in truck. Well, hey, we told you about that weak spot, but you wouldn't help us because there was no money. We have to find a way to work together. You were given the word that we need something to prevent an escape, but we didn't get the help.
Sounds like our normal reactive type scenario. We wait till it happens, then we react.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and like what we saw, and that's a good scenario. I'm asking for the razor ribbon. I can't get it. The escape happens. All of a sudden, the emergency money comes in. So regular money's not there. That's how it's allocated.
Right.
This is different money. Now we can give you the razor ribbon. Well, it's a day late and a dollar short, and now we got an escape hunt, and the public perception is blown for the whatever agency.
Exactly. And it's our job to protect the public. And here we are letting things slide.
Well, and by the release of that money, like Rick just said, now the release of the money's there, but whose expense was it at? It was at the
Right.
reputation department.
I think New Orleans jail escape is a great example. I don't know the final outcome yet, so I won't say anything. I've been watching closely. They had me on the New Orleans news 3 times, and some people call it lucky. I think just from investigating escapes and being a correctional officer, every time they interviewed me, I hit it right on the nose. I said on the first interview, this could very possibly be not a uniformed officer like a lot of people are thinking. Who do they think of first? Oh, the correctional officer helped. I don't know if they're going to find out a correctional officer helped them, but I told them this could very well be with the assistance of a maintenance man. Guess what happened? It was a maintenance man. We know for sure it was one of them.
Going back on the conversation we were having, I think corrections is at a pivoting point right now. I think that we have been the hidden group for so long that nobody knows what's going on in there. We weren't in communication with the media. We didn't really talk to the public. We had our meetings, but we had stakeholders there. We had people from the community that had a reason to be there, to come to our facility to talk about, what projects we had, what we can purchase from communities. So it's always a very, very close, secretive type thing, this mystery little building that's out there. And that's what I like about your podcast, Mike Cantrell's podcast, Prisoner Officers podcast. We've got Bold Move podcast. We've got more podcasts that are coming out there and trying to inform the public so they understand what the prison is about. Because unfortunately, the news media, like you said, the movies, they don't do us any justice. Every time you see a movie, we're always the bad guys. We're always the ones who are worse than the people who are in there, and it's just absolutely not the truth. And yes, we do have from time to time a corrupt staff member that totally makes us look terrible. However, and you even point out in your book, the vast majority are so much the honorable people that we want protecting the community. And I really want to commend the people like you who are getting out there in the forefront and changing that image. And we just need to get more of us and more vocal out there.
Just going to say, I try my best, but if we could get the voice out higher, to the public, and we need to get it higher. These legislative folks, they get worried when you come up and say, "I'm from corrections. I want to talk to you about this," and it's almost like, I know what you want. You want more money, and they need to start listening to it.
Hey, back in May of 2025, Gary, I saw your TV interviews when the 10 inmates escaped jail from New Orleans, and I believe there was understaffing and policy protocols weren't being followed, like security checks by line staff and supervisors. I know there was classification wasn't being followed. Minimum and high security inmates were being housed together. I know it took about 8 hours before the staff even knew there was an escape.
Right.
So that was a colossal failure. So is this the end result of what we have been talking about tonight? The low staffing, inadequate training, overworked, substandard budget, staff corruption. This is the result. Yes.
I'm glad you put it that way, because that's the perfect scenario for the end result of these things if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And there's a leadership issue there, and there's definitely nobody being watched. How do you not do your counts? You know, now you're falsifying records saying you did your counts. Anyway, I agree with you 100%. That's the end result when things aren't done correctly. Officer safety. You know, thank goodness no officer was killed or injured. And also the public safety. Thank goodness nobody was killed by those inmates that escaped.
Hey, I'm like a dog with a bone. We had a we had a guy on here, Paul Raymonds, I think, was talking
Yeah.
about getting the information out, getting ahead of stories. I I want to beat that dead horse for a minute. Is that, you know, in all these situations, and we have our own that we can talk about, where the agency doesn't put out any information. You know, I think the agencies do themselves a disservice, and I don't know if it's the leadership or it's political or what, but the public has gets this terrible perception of corrections, whether it be jail, sheriff's office, or whatever, because the information is coming from everywhere else and are made up stories or they're blown out of proportion. Uh, so I wonder how do you feel about uh, you know, these public information officers, so to speak, that's what we always call them, that could be trained properly so that they're actually putting out real useful information and getting ahead of these stories rather than trying to catch up, trying to mop up a mess.
No, exactly. I agree with you 100%. And not only the public information officers, but when I was a felony probation officer, every week a different officer from our office had to go out to the community meeting. So like when it was my turn, I'm at the community hall meeting, and all the people come from the community, and I'm standing there and I say, I'm Gary York, I'm a probation officer. If you have any questions, that's what I do, blah, blah, blah. And they can ask me questions. I don't see a lot, and I know there's some that do. So for those of you that are doing it, you're doing it right. Getting us out in the public to talk to the public at some of these community meetings. We need more of that. And obviously the warden would be a great one to be at the meeting to kick it off, and then say, here's one of my officers, and let the officers speak, because they have to see what we really are. What's the old saying? You know, I don't see them, so I don't know what they're doing. If they see us, see our uniform, we shake hands with them, you know, do a little politicking, I guess. I think we could get our community to understand us better. And we could say, hey, if you want to know more about corrections, um, check Corrections Connection. Check Mike Cantrell out on the Prison Podcast, you know. And if we do stuff like that, maybe we could veer some of them to really learn what we really do. So I think you've got a great point there. We need to get in the community more.
Well, and I agree with you too, Rick and Gary. I truly feel that you know, with more transparency and clear communication, you take out the interpretation factor. So, for example, if I'm not giving that clear communication, I'm not filling those gaps, then that leaves the public to fill it with their interpretation of how the event's going, which is where we tend to get off track as far as what's really going on. So I can agree 100% that that level of transparency and clear communication, you know, and, you know, just keeping them informed. We get that there are certain aspects of this career that are secure, you know, when things are pending investigations and things of that nature. But to be transparent up to that point is really important, and keeping them updated along the way. By doing that, you're no longer allowing the rumor to become gospel. You know, it's just gone. You know what I mean? You're constantly feeding the truth as it unveils, as it becomes available. So yeah, I agree with you guys 100%. I think that's a great lesson.
You know, and that's one of the things that I learned a lot, especially when I made that level of warden. I had to focus on the whole budget, not just a section of the budget. And you see that a lot of times the money, there's certain things you can't control. The thing that you can control is the level of training you give your staff, the interactions you have with the community. Throw some fresh paint on and invite the community in. Let them come and see how safe, secure the facility is. Let them see the professionalism of the staff that you have. Bring them in and let them see it. You know, you can lock the place down to make it safer, to move them around faster. Do it. I used to do mine at count time. I had a small facility. I'd say, okay, we're going to start now. We're going to walk around during count time. Then we're going to come in the visitation room. And we're going to show you things that you might not be aware of. And because it takes away that myth of what are those people out there, what really goes on. And it also eliminates other people to be able to inject the information. So that's what I really loved about your book. Your book was really a step-by-step guide throughout the entire prison experience, as far as whether you're, even if you read it not working in a prison, you're going to understand a prison better and the things that go on. You know what people else don't understand? And your book points it out. How much manipulation is going on just to introduce contraband? How much are those staff members exposed to as far as the worst behavior possible? You know, they're exposed to a lot of that, and they need to be heralded and they need to be cheered. They need to be given the support that they deserve. Sorry I get emotional about it, because of all of us sitting on this podcast have known people, including ourselves, we've had to deal with those things, and there's no support. You go down the road and nobody even cares. Oh, you work at the prison. And I'm proud of that. I'm very
Oh
proud of
yeah.
that.
Yes. I'm proud of it. I think at the beginning, when you told me to tell a little bit, I'm glad I did 28.8 years, because remember, I thought I was just going to use it as a holdover, and I'm so glad I just stayed there.
Me too.
Yeah, well, and I want to add to that as well. You know, like Pete said, the manipulation that these folks are exposed to. What some people don't realize is you know, when we are raised in our lives and in society, we're raised for the most part until given a reason. Most people are trustworthy. So when we're hiring now at the ages between 18 and 21 years old, depending on commission status, when we bring them in, we are letting them enter a world of manipulation that they have never been exposed to. And unfortunately, you know, pointing back to what we were just talking about, lack of training. One class on games inmates played during new hire is not enough to defend yourself 12 hours a day, you know, hundreds of hours a month, you know, and people don't, it, when you see people fall prey to that manipulation, you know, people are real quick to point the finger at them and judge. And it's like, well, don't get me wrong. Yes, what they did was wrong. And yes, it comes with a price. But what would be the better success? Us coming up with a solution to solve it before it happened, or continue to try to increase that amount of training on the front end so the next guy, you know, doesn't fall into that trap? You know, it's like this never ending cycle. And so, how do you feel about that? Do you ever look at those situations and think, man, we really need to change our strategy?
Yes, we need to change our strategy to say, let's work harder to save our officers and cut these things off early so that we can save them.
Right.
If they come to you and say, I brought that inmate gum and I know
Yep.
it was wrong. Now, if you told me you brought him drugs or something, that's criminal. We're you know, even under 944.47 in Florida, gum is contraband. I mean, it's still, but the state attorney, you know, isn't going to prosecute for gum. So
Right.
the state attorney says, handle it
Right.
administratively. He brought a sandwich,
Right.
or he brought gum. Handle it administratively. Do you want to try to save the officer, or do you think because they brought gum in on the sandwich, we need to fire him right away? You know, I kind of think that with the way things are going now, we probably could retrain this officer, put him on remedial training, give him another officer for another 5 weeks of training, and go
Right.
through this thing again like they were a rookie, and emphasize and teach ethics and teach things. There's some people who say, no, they brought an inmate a sandwich, they're gone, they're fired.
Right.
I guess it's opinion, but we can
Yeah.
save some of these officers. And One of the worst things I hated to do, some officer did something wrong. 15-year officer, 10-year officer. They saw it. They didn't report it. Pressure from the others, that did it. You're going to be
Right.
a snitch. You're going to
Yeah.
be a rat. When the investigation was over, it was learned that they saw this happen and didn't report it. And I remember sitting in the warden's office telling them this is what we found. And I remember the warden sad. He was just like, these are two good officers. If there's no darn way they're going to let me keep them, not for not reporting that. And they got fined. I felt terrible. They were nice people. I thought they were good officers as well. But I try to tell everybody, don't you ruin your life over somebody else.
Well, and I agree with you 100%. I've pushed the message years and years. Don't throw your career away over typical inmate. What's the word? Culture. Don't snitch. Well, wait a minute now. You're law enforcement, and you have a requirement to
Right.
report. You have a duty to intervene. You have a responsibility to provide this, and I think, pushing that message on the front end, one thing that I've always tried to express to teams that I've ever led in the past was, when an officer comes to me as a leader because they fear that you are about to fall into that trap, you need to thank them, because when I come to you now, it's on the front end, and all the goal is to get you on track, and we don't have to go down that other road of the trap. You know what I mean? And kind of encouraging that behavior on the front end, because one thing I've learned in corrections, and I'm curious if you agree, is because we have been tailored to grow in our careers on so little when it comes to budget or training and all that, we have no other choice but to rely on communication, motivation, and inspiration, because those things are free. And I've learned from valuable leaders that I've worked for in the past, when you can inspire and motivate me, the work ethic that you get out of that, the return is phenomenal, even at a short level. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. If you're a leader that wants your staff to be successful, lead with empathy, and you show your staff you care, and you give credit where credit is due, unfortunately, some leaders have said that was my idea. That's why it went so well. And it was actually that frontline officer's idea. I'm going to say the frontline officer came up with that, boss. I can't take credit for that. It was officer so-and-so and so-and-so. When they see that, like in the military, they say that leader, that's a leader. We're going to work for him and we're going to back him, and yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Gary, in corrections, we know staff wellness must be addressed. We know the same systemic issues are plaguing jails and prisons nationwide. We know as a whole there's a lack of training. We know violent incidents must be reduced. We know contraband must be controlled. We know all this, yet I don't see and I don't feel the urgency to adequately address these problems. We talk about it, and we're talking about it tonight, and that's great. That's a start. But I believe we're at a point where talking is over. We simply need action. Gary, if you could pick one thing you would like to see agencies do right now to make a difference, what would that be?
I would like to see agencies train better and teach better, that we all have to work as a team. And I would like to see communication line between the front line, mid management, and upper management, with the understanding that not everything we ask for can be done, but at least we respond back with why we can't do it right now, and an appreciation for your thoughts. Feedback. I think I'm trying to get to feedback. I believe everyone should listen to each other's feedback. I even believe that in wardens training, when they decide and make decisions for the following year, A lot of the warden's decisions should be based on frontline feedback. How are we going to get that information? We could do surveys. We could do boxes. They drop their ideas in. And it's all computerized now. We don't have to do the old paper thing. And we can figure out all the areas that are weak, all the areas that are strong, and we can go to our warden's meeting and say, this is the feedback from my front line. And it looks like there's a concern right here. And I think making decisions off of feedback is a much more appropriate way to get to the root cause of a bad culture or things that we need.
Well said.
And like what you said you did when you went to that other facility and you opened it up for them to tell you what was going on. I truly believe, because I remember staff would say, well, if the box you're putting your suggestions in is at a camera, they're going to go back and watch the camera, or they're going to try to do what they can to find out who you are so they can hold you accountable for the comments that you made. And so I believe, like you did, you went in as a third party person, don't know anybody. You're not here to cause anybody problems. You just want to get what they have to say down so you can share that information. And that's going back to what we're talking about is I've seen so many people and I've talked to so many people since we started this podcast, and you're finding out that everybody wants to hit a reset button on corrections and just get it started over again. And I think that's what I meant by earlier by saying is that we're at a pivot point in time. Though a lot of us grew up with 3 TV channels, a telephone that if you weren't by it and it rang, nobody answered it, a cord that was 20 foot long so you could go into another room while you were talking to somebody on the phone. We didn't grow up with the amount of information flow that people have today and are reliant upon today. So we, as these leaders, must shift and adjust. We have to change to understand what this work culture needs. And we need to be the safeguards to make sure that the concepts and ideas are going to roll out the best they possibly can. Hopefully we achieve success. If not, we tweak it, we try it again. But I believe, like you, by doing your podcast, by writing your books, by doing the interviews and doing as much as you are post corrections career, we've got to get the reset button hit, and we got to stop talking like Chris talked about earlier. We got to stop talking about it. We need to get this collective of people together, and let's start giving an example of what corrections could be.
Exactly. And I don't like to hear when people say nothing's going to change. We've talked about it for 10 years. It's not going to change. Got to get the attitude right. We got to keep the positive attitude. It's hard. It'll be hard, especially when somebody's just come off a 20-hour shift. It's going to be hard, but attitude is a big thing. And if we could keep the positive attitude flowing and get the message out to the community, maybe the community could help us get the message to the legislature. But you're right. We have to do action now is what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and I want to add to this same thing for Chris and you, Pete. When those conversations happen, like Chris said, talking's not enough, especially if we talk as we typically do in corrections historically. We talk about the problems. Once we identify those problems, we typically look for what to blame. In reality, what we need to talk about is, okay, this is the problem. And if we're a room of professionals that carry 100+ years of experience, then we need to have solutions with that conversation the time that it happens. Not just focus, not spending that, if we have that hour meeting to discuss just the hour pointing at the problems. We already knew that when we came in the room. We've got to be solution focused and then start putting together that game plan immediately, and I think over time we've just kind of gotten away from that because let's be real, in corrections we are never short on problems. we tend to have a surplus of problems, and I get that, but what that means then is for all the years that we've been in there, that should make us masters at solving them, and together we can do that.
True.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of honest, hard working officers that are so tired of their image being tainted by a few bad apples in the media. And they work so hard to do the right thing. And then they go to the gas station and they fill up their tank in uniform because they're either on the way to work or on the way home. And somebody looks at them and says, "Oh, you're one of them." That's happened. And they're trying to do everything they can to be honest, hardworking officers, and they get that from the community. And that's why we need to teach the community. You can't talk about everybody that way. They're not all that way. It's just very few. I just want to say that I think corrections professionals have the knowledge and they have the will to get things done, and we just need to now work with the community perception, legislative perception, and we need to train in leadership, ethics, and those things. And we need to keep everybody retained and employed. And we can do it by doing these things, and we can save a lot of jobs by doing that.
Absolutely. And that's why podcasts like yours, like Become My Cantrels, this podcast and other podcasts are designed around corrections, getting the word out. I know we talk about subscribers. The reason why we talk about subscribers is because when you attach to us, we get our message out to the people who are attached to you. And they will understand more about corrections because they're getting more communication. So I highly suggest that you get online, take a look at this other YouTube and take a look at these podcasts, and let's make sure that we get the subscriptions in there so we can get the word out. And another thing I firmly believe in, this book was written for a reason. And the reason I feel that this book was written was because Gary took his 28 and a half years and he put it all in this book to give officers and staff members the opportunity to understand prisons better and to understand what the duties are and why the duties exist. And there's no duty that's too small. Every duty is very, very important. So Gary, on behalf of Corrections Unfiltered, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. And we hope that we could have you again on another night. We could talk about even more corrections conversations.
Well, I thank you all very much. It was a great opportunity to be on this show with you and to talk with you about this. And thank you for what you do. Thank you all for the service you did, because you also
Thank you.
did full-length careers to protect and serve for our community. And I thank you very much for everything.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Gary.
much, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
Gary, I appreciate you.